Long before the telegraph or the radio, global intelligence was stamped into existence through brute, heavy mechanical force. We are going to read this specific issue of the American Weekly Mercury as if it were a live intelligence briefing. Printed in Philadelphia on April 6, 1721, it is our single source of truth for the events of the day. To a colonial reader, unfolding this broadsheet revealed a globe consumed by sudden violence and extreme physical peril. The dispatches arriving at the port fall into three distinct categories: massive military offensives, paralyzing natural and economic disasters, and a maritime economy besieged by heavily armed outlaws. This single briefing synthesizes delayed reports from a vast spatial arena, connecting the isolated colonies of the Americas to the volatile coastlines of Africa and the power centers of Europe. These dispatches provide a granular view of the friction between intended imperial order and the reality of a world often operating beyond the state's control. We begin at the Strait of Gibraltar. A dispatch from Malaga details a major projection of European military power onto the North African coastline. The headline event is a highly dangerous amphibious assault by Spanish troops onto Moorish territory. The landing zone was lethal. Troops established their beachhead, as reported, within 2 musket shot of the place. Survival was possible only because the landing was under shelter of the fire of the cannon of our men of war, suppressing the defenders. The resistance was immense. The Moors rapidly mobilized over 3,000 infantry and overwhelming firepower, utilizing upwards of 40 pieces on their batteries to inflict immediate casualties on the Spanish engineers directing the landing. Despite taking fire, the Spanish troops successfully executed their tactical countermaneuvers, rapidly forming into tightly organized battalions and squadrons directly on the hostile shore. The strategic objective behind this immense risk was to subvert the Kingdom of Fez, exploiting an existing proxy war between the Moors and the neighboring Algerines to expand Spanish influence. This single dispatch from Malaga exposes the heavy casualties, extreme violence, and logistical audacity required to forcefully maintain imperial expansion in the Mediterranean. Moving north to continental Europe, the threats shift from military maneuvers to sudden civilian crises. A report from Crema, Italy, details a bizarre meteorological catastrophe, a violent tempest of hail so severe it shattered local generational memory. The Venetian dispatch provides specific measurements of the destruction. The hailstones weighed in at above 6 pounds weight. The consequences for the local agrarian economy were lethal. The falling ice destroyed several men and beasts who were in the fields. Traveling further east to Vienna, the paper reports on a reactionary economic decree that highlights another layer of imperial vulnerability. An empire-wide ordinance enforced the strict prohibition of wearing jewels within the emperor's dominions. The root cause was an influx of wealth fleeing France. Millions in assets brought into the emperor's dominions triggered a severe cross-border market panic. To the 1721 reader, state stability appeared incredibly fragile. Whether from an anomalous agrarian collapse or a sudden influx of foreign capital, the internal machinery of an empire could seize up without warning. The intelligence map then rapidly shifts to the West African coast, delivering a critical update on international maritime security.
The trade routes are completely compromised. A highly organized, heavily armed pirate armada is dominating the African coastline. The dispatch reports 17 pirate ships continually cruising that coast. This fleet possessed immense artillery distribution, 8 ships carrying 10 guns each, 4 ships with 40 guns, and 5 more armed with 30 guns. They comfortably outgunned many legitimate naval squadrons. Operating without state resistance, this armada exhibited completely unchecked tactical behavior. They landed at the chief commercial factories and committed what the paper terms incredible depredations along the coast. 18th century naval engagements were chaotic, smoke-filled events defined by close-quarters violence and overwhelming cannon fire. Merchant vessels faced zero probability of survival against 17 ships. Across the Atlantic and the Caribbean, the British Empire was executing brutal reactionary countermeasures to reclaim control of the seas. In a lethal judicial response, the dispatch notes that several men were lately executed at Jamaica for piracy, a severe penalty intended to deter the growing armada. The concentration of 40 gun-ships and the scale of the fleet represents a shift from maritime crime to full-scale naval competition. This was a militarized, stateless force capable of challenging the sovereign navies of the era. Anchoring our focus in the Americas, we can see how volatile political intelligence flowed through the colonial ports alongside regular trade. A massive, unverified geopolitical rumor arriving via St. Domingo threatened to upend the European balance of power. The paper prints the terrifying word on the street: the young French king is dead. For a colonial subject, the sudden collapse of a rival monarchy's succession was a highly dangerous existential variable. A vacuum of power in France meant immediate, bloody warfare spilling into the colonies. Yet, directly beneath the panic of global succession, the intelligence pivots abruptly to the granular realities of regional maritime crime. A Philadelphia-owned vessel, the sloop Little Betty, had been run away with at Jamaica. This was an opportunistic mutiny. The ship was stolen directly from the harbor, while the master, Matthew Wooten, was ashore. The report names the culprits explicitly: Edward Clark, the mate, John Evans, a mariner, and John Dyer, the shoemaker. It serves as a hyper-local, personalized wanted poster embedded in the global news. This creates a profound parody of print. The colonial mind had to process the death of a king and the theft of a local boat with equal gravity. Both directly impacted their immediate physical safety and their local economy. Pulling back to view the complete intelligence map, the density and geographical spread of these crises become overwhelmingly apparent. European empires were desperate to project structural power globally, yet they were constantly bleeding control on every front. 18th century stability was an illusion, constantly punctured by 40-gun pirate fleets, 6-pound hailstones, and sudden market collapses. The colonial reader lived at the extreme edges of these fragile empires, relying on weeks-old ink to calculate their own odds of survival in a hostile world. This single piece of parchment, carrying reports from April of 1721, is proof of that reality. It shows us that the colonial era was not defined by orderly dominance, but by precarious survival within a highly interconnected theater of threats.
The Daily Dispatch, history in print. No modern gloss, no modern hint. Just black and white, and read today. The Daily Dispatch is on